Okay, I'll just jump in. How about a quick show of hands? Who in here uses satellite or aerial imagery? Okay, well that's pretty good. I kind of expected a majority of you would, based on the nature of this presentation. So just a little bit about my history and my origins. Long ago, I was working on the Landsat. My first professional foray into this was working on the Landsat calibration stuff. So and this even started before Landsat 8. This was with Landsat 7 to date myself even further. And then just from then on, I've been doing primarily satellite and geospatial-based either tools or analysis. I worked on the NV software platform for a while. Did a lot of geospatial stuff with a company called Trimble, which is a lot of field geospatial applications. And now I just kind of jumped at the opportunity to work with Planet because I think they have a really unique approach and a unique vision of satellite imaging. So I'll jump ahead with that. So our vision at Planet is about imaging the whole Earth every day. No satellite constellation can come even close to that right now. Typically satellites, to get a same view of the Earth, is up to a 2-week cycle. It can be up, a little bit less, a 5-day cycle with someone like a Sentinel program. But we wanted to provide actionable, visionable, daily change with a new approach to satellite imaging. So, I'm going to just step through I try to put lots of pretty pictures in the slides and lots of neat animations because we do love our pictures. Kind of one of the applications that is used in satellite imagery is obviously around commercial infrastructure. So we have here, right, you can see, I'll just go through these kind of quickly. We've got kind of 3 day-to-day changes that are happening in a port at Cape Town, South Africa. Hopefully that's not going too fast. So, when you are only imaging the Earth, right, on an every, or a place on the Earth, let's say, on an every 2-week cycle, or even on an every 5-day cycle, this type of information is almost not actionable. It's kind of, gee whiz, that's interesting. I get to see that. Sorry about this. I think it may just be a cable issue. That's probably, don't touch anything. All right. So, we can see here that, that there's, a distinct and very noticeable differences just from day to day. Here's the 14th, here's the 15th. Ships have moved. I'll even show some other pictures later on in the presentation that, show a lot more of the infrastructure that is changing on a day-to-day basis, even within the, port overall mechanics. Okay, so another thing is in the event of agriculture and land use, land change. So we can see here's just a quick example, enormous differences before and after a sugarcane harvest, right? This is obviously not necessarily something that is happening overnight. This is not a day-to-day transformation. But what is really important to point out is that, sugarcane typically is a tropically grown crop. It is incredibly difficult to image tropical areas because of cloud cover. On a 2-week basis, if you're incredibly lucky if you get one shot in a 4-month period. By imaging every day, it opens up huge new horizons for us to understand, what is actually happening on the ground. Here is another really good example of that. So if you go into Google Earth right now, awesome tool, awesome imagery. We see ourselves certainly as a complement to this product and to this platform. You can view Landsat 7 and Landsat 8 data. They do have time sliders. You can go back with certain imagery. It's certainly by no means, what we know is it's not an authoritative source. It's not something that you would use to plan. It's not something that you would use to create, actionable intelligence around. Here's an example of a Worldview 2 product from Digital Globe. Great product, great resolution, great fidelity. But again, they suffer kind of from the problem of they can't image on a day-to-day basis. And so in an area like this is down here in Indonesia, extremely cloudy, extremely tropical, very, very hard to get imagery. But you start being able to access this data with Planet because we're imaging on basically a daily basis now. And you can see that you really start to understand much more of what's happening under this cloud cover as we kind of step through time and incorporate these new satellite sources. One last quick example. This is certainly not a new application to satellite imaging, but what it does show us is the ability to understand change on a very, very short turnaround. So there's pretty much perpetual fires in the mountains around Los Angeles, just because there's Santa Cruz winds that come in every fall. It's very dry. It's quite typical. So what we use is the vegetation index tool. This is nothing new. This is not like anything that we came up with on our own. But what we can see here is really like the day-to-day progression of either wildfires of pressure, or wildfire fighting. So what we have here, you can see in the red lines that don't show up super well on the screen, but maybe if I kind of mouse over, this is a little bit hard. You can actually see the fire retardant lines here in red, and you can see the fire scars are clearly visible in this. And then if we view this in a near infrared color composite, you see just even more of the striking contrast between where vegetation has been burnt and where it has been preserved. One thing that I find is actually really interesting in this particular use case is how in some of these in the bottoms of some of these valleys that the vegetation managed to survive this fire. I just thought that was really kind of interesting. So overall, right, how is satellite imagery used? It's obviously used in many different industries, from agriculture, social impact. In fact, the application of daily imagery in the social impact sphere, I think, is kind of one of our greatest opportunities, because you can imagine being able to image, for example, the entire rim of the Indian Ocean after that tsunami that we had back in 2004, 5. Right, it was weeks and weeks of Earth imaging collection before we had a cohesive and comprehensive picture of everything that was going on there, because of both things like cloud cover and because of gaps in coverage. So just the ability for us to respond to these events in an incredibly fast way it's really what our mission is all about. Planet is also a very kind of mission-driven company, way more sort of mission-focused, honestly, than we are commercially focused, and we kind of pride ourselves on that. So things that you can do with same-day or day-to-day imagery include, knowing the overall health of forest and water resources, things that change on a very fast scale. The ability to action and plan in very short turnaround times for things like disasters, for security applications also. Agriculture is a huge thing for both monitoring and planning. We have a huge base, actually one of our biggest bases, agriculture people who want large area monitoring because they actually use that information for activity planning, like if they need to irrigate more, if they need to fertilize more. Believe it or not, I mean, satellite for these large farm satellites imagery is a pretty critical piece of that. And we talked really kind of about the application, for infrastructure and for security monitoring, kind of knowing on a day-to-day basis, this satellite approach really opens up these doors. So, oh goodness, this works. Another thing that we are really invested in is something that we call time-lapse base maps. So what we have here are global base maps where the entire base map is generated from, in this case, monthly data collects. Nobody has ever been able to do anything like this before. These are available, either as files that you can pull across through our API or plug and play web services. But the ability to have a regional base map that is within a month old, where no data is basically more than a month old, is really quite remarkable. When I have three or four animations up here, I think what's most useful is if you fix your eyes on a single pixel. You really sort of see how that specific pixel is changing rather than just, how drastic the overall image is changing. So you can see in there, quite a bit of agriculture activity that can now be tracked with satellite-based maps. What's that? Oh, that was outside of Christchurch, New Zealand. Yep. This is in Libya. You can see, again, obviously a very different geography, very different climate, but you can see, again, with these time-lapse base maps, how well you can visualize imagery and how you can action and understand what's going on short time scales. I have zoomed in here just because it shows a little bit better, but I've got one more example, and then I'll sort of start to show you what it looks like when you zoom out at a global scale. I think the port thing is really interesting too, because your first thing is like, oh, everybody's looking at the boats. Oh, look at the boats come and go. Even more interesting is if you actually look at like the containers and the movement on shore. That's honestly what more people are more interested in, the people who are doing securities and trading, futures and forecasting. This type of data set, shows them like the type and amount of activity that are going on at both commercial centers as well as in the defense segment. So if we zoom out now, we're looking at some more regional scales. This is a little bit slower, sorry. But the ability, again, to generate a countrywide base map, a countrywide mosaic, all within the span of a given month, especially somewhere like in India, where tropical issues tend to be extremely complex for satellite imaging systems. Something we're just incredibly excited about. And you can zoom in full resolution to this, down to the 3.5 meters that we provide out of the satellite constellation. But I just think that zoom out is really, really kind of neat and interesting. And just sort of like both the climatological implications that this can be used in modeling or even sort of verification is really handy. And then when we zoom out on the global scale, you do start to see the bigger picture. You're going to see in here, especially in some of the earlier base maps, you'll see some light gray area. That means where we don't have coverage. And there's two reasons why we don't have coverage, especially in the earlier time slices on here. One is because we didn't have our full constellation in place. And two, obviously, again, I kind of keep harping on this around the tropics, it's so hard to get imagery for extended periods of time. There's easily a month that goes by where you're not going to get a single image. And so using this to, so many applications in the tropics, people are using it obviously for agriculture, for forestry monitoring, especially for a lot of illegal encroachment on sensitive forest zones. We work with defense agencies who are trying to monitor drug traffic by looking at these very quick airfields that sort of pop up so they can do some quick trafficking and then they kind of go away within the span of a couple of weeks. It's a big problem. So as I've really kind of mentioned, the biggest challenges that we face are limited coverage, low revisit rates, and there has been issues even about slow access. Sometimes either by regulatory issues or by rights or ownership, depending on who may have tasked a satellite in the past, it can be weeks before you may get access to an image that is of interest to you. In the past, task or imagery collection. Don't touch anything. Planet emergency, right? I know, right? That's what we call our tech support. Captain Planet to the rescue. I'll try not to. Sorry about this. Okay, well. We'll just try to do this. The historical approach is, I don't think it's the laptop per se. I feel like it may be just the...
Let's try that adapter.
Okay. This is a brand new adapter too. I just opened the package. Okay. Right?
It's not flashing anymore, so we're all winning.
Let's just, again, get back to, sorry about this. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, let's hope for the best. Captain Planet to the rescue. The historical approach has been about tasking. You have low coverage. It can be a delay to get access, and it's typically very expensive. Tasking a satellite or asking for satellite tasking is very expensive, but that has really been how things have worked. We wanted to go for this always-on approach, constant imaging and data available to everybody. It could be very difficult if you were interested in, I'm from Denver, if you're interested in imagery over Denver, somebody else is in the queue for a satellite provider and they want imagery to the southeast of Denver, it can be, even though the satellite may be tracking directly over where you want to go, somebody else owns the right to that tasking, and you don't get the imagery. That is typically quite a problem for people. So, in addition to our always-on approach, and I've got kind of we've got three constellations that are providing data to satellite right now. We've got the Rapid Eye constellation, which has been around for some time. That was an acquisition that Planet made when we started to go commercial. And then we just acquired SkySat from Google, and that closed in April. So now we have, an always-on approach with our 130 PlanetScope satellites. And just for your guys' reference, the PlanetScope satellites are about the size of a post box. I can fit it in my backpack. So it's a really innovative approach to satellites. The other two are about the size of a refrigerator, about the volume of a refrigerator. So we have these three constellations that are providing, a variety of spectral information, spatial, and temporal information. Anybody who knows in satellite imaging knows that there's always a trade-off between kind of those three things. So I think this is really interesting. What does it look like for us to commission 88 satellites? So we just did a launch in February with 88 satellites on a single platform. This is pretty exciting. It broke like a world record. And so they all come out at once, right? And so to get them into basically a uniform distributed orbit, it takes us, as you can see on the graph over here on the right, it takes us about 7 months to get all the way there. However, it really actually only takes us about 3 to 4 months to get to almost near daily coverage. In fact, we show down here, where is it? There we go. That we get to about full, near, or daily plus coverage in October. Our commissioning process has been going so well that we're actually going to hit that at the end of June. And I can't think of a time in my life where I have ever worked anywhere where I said things are going ahead of schedule, right? That it's like, we're even surprised. We're like, okay, what's the catch? What's really interesting too about how we get these satellites into orbit like this is each one is basically parameterized with a unique orientation of its solar panels. And so we use very minor differences in atmospheric differential drag to kind of slow these things down incrementally. So I was even amazed that even works. It's like, wow, go engineers. I'm on the I don't know anything about the mechanical side of stuff. I've always been on the software side of things. And so I'm truly amazed at what these platform people have been able to accomplish. I think I really kind of covered this. But in a nutshell, we've got PlanetScope, SkySat, and Rapid Eye. Spatial resolution from 0.78 with the SkySat up to 6.5 meters. Spectral resolution, RGB, near-infrared PAN, as well as red edge. And then we value very much open available data sources. So we provide provide Landsat and Sentinel on the platform. No charge, anybody can come in and get it. These are great spectral resources. These are a great additional resource, and we want it to be like a single source for anybody to come and get all of these different data sources. I think I pretty much covered what I wanted to say on this piece, but really, like, all of these in a single platform, available as GeoTIFFs as well as web services, especially for the BASEMAPS. So OGC sources like WMTS and OpenStreetMaps allow you to plug and play these into any number of third-party applications. We have an end-to-end system. I'm going to jump through these a little bit because I want to talk a little bit about the API. Just know that we have the ground station and all of the cloud infrastructure to deploy the whole system to capture image and get everything to you from the satellite within 24 hours. The access to the data, so we do a whole bunch of processing and we'll just leave it at that. A whole bunch of processing to the data. You'd think it would come off the satellite as a pretty picture and you would just deliver it to the end user, but unfortunately there's quite a bit that has to go on, from orientating, geo-rectifying, calibrating, block bundle adjustment. We do all that, take care of every piece of that for the user. So at the end of the day, you're getting geospatially ortho-rectified data within 10 meters error, and available to you through the GUI. You can download easily right through the application or through the API, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about the API in the following steps, or through our web services, whether it's OGC or OpenLayers. So the Planet API is a RESTful API. This means it's basically oriented just around HTTP GET put responses. Get and post responses. It uses, basically what it does is, using JSON text segments, you post queries and you get JSON responses back. And the JSON responses are something that we call endpoints. And they basically sort of point you to the end of a node or end of a tree in our data structure. It's a stateless system, so it doesn't sort of require any continual knowledge between server and client. You post a query. I want, this data from this sensor at this time zone, and we have a lot of filtering options. If you want to put in something like solar azimuth, if you want to put in something like % cloud cover, all of these can be put into the query, and you get the results back. We provide item types, which I'll show in the next slide. We provide asset types, so what satellite is this coming from? And then ultimately what you want, or what you get back, is a link to that individual satellite image. And so as you sort of go through the various endpoints, you basically get to like the name of the exact image that you want, and then you can just pull it down. These are the types. It's really basically just all the imagery that come off of the satellites that I was talking about before. Read all this right now before I advance. This is just a simple example of what a JSON return looks like. So there's, obviously when you get a response back, you're going to need to do some parsing of this response. You can either, ways to access this before I get into that is you can either use this through a command line, through either a CLI, there's a Planet CLI command line interface, or curl. Directly through any code. I have Python and JavaScript here, but if you use MATLAB, if you use IDL, if you use Java, anything that can do a HTTP connection and request can establish a connection with our server. And then, of course, through our GUI tools. I think it's just kind of worth pointing out, like, when you do get the requests back, I think using something like JQ can be really helpful to kind of parse these down. I'm not going to really belabor this. All of this is included in the documentation, but I think there's just a lot of resources there to kind of help manage and parse through all of these JSONs. From the standpoint of the mechanics, it is permission oriented, and it does limit access to the data, right? I mean, you kind of do have to be a paying customer to get full and unlimited access to the data. That being said, we do have a very nice free program, especially for people that may just want to kind of dabble and test with imagery on a daily basis. I'll show you about that. And then there's a bunch of other stuff you probably don't really need to worry about unless you're really in the major commercial space, and that's things like rate limits or payload size. And if you're at that point, you're working with us closely anyways. Yes, we handle errors. Okay, so here's an example. If any of you guys talked or managed to get into Dimitri's session yesterday, he actually went through kind of what an end-to-end workflow looks like of taking data into the FME tool builder and getting a result out of it. So there's kind of an eye chart. There's a lot to read up here, but it's basically taking in a Planet image. It's taking in a digital elevation model. It's doing some analysis, it's doing some spatial clipping, and at the end of the day, you're getting a nice 3D visualization of an NDVI image draped over an elevation model that has vertical exaggeration applied. So all of this done within FME. And we are just, you're right, Planet up here, we're just like one little tiny node in this is just one data source. Read the docs. They're all there for you. I'm assuming that these presentations are maybe distributed afterwards, so that's why wanted to include all this. For those ESRI users, there are some nice ESRI sample codes as well out there that take Python and plug it into an image services that are distributed through the ESRI platform. So again, just reference this URL if you're ever going back. So we have this Open California. This is that free example that I talked about. It's a full, anybody can have the full access to California. It's a really good way to kind of just dabble and understand, what can I get out of this data? What's the value of daily imagery to me? Especially for people who may be trying to build or prototype tools or applications. Okay, phew, made it through with a couple of minutes to spare. I have three last examples of imagery that are coming off of our SkySat satellite. This is our, our high res. This is our sub-meter constellation. We've got 5 up, another 7 coming out, so we're going to have a lot of data coming around this. The application that this was used on was people were actually monitoring the floating levels of these storage tanks, and they're using it for commodities forecasting. Open pit mine here in Namibia, I think it is. Yep, didn't even know there was a uranium mine in Namibia. Now I know. Now you know. And then here's just a sample kind of imagery over Frankfurt. And I'm going fast because this is Freeport, California. I do want to give 3 whole minutes to questions. Whew. Okay.
Thank you. And you're now less than 3 minutes because they clap for you.
That's true,
Thank
right.
you. Does anyone have any questions? I'm sure he's going to be around and would love to talk over beers if you can't get him.
Absolutely.
Dennis?
Commercial terms for this on your website, or how do we understand that you might want to subscribe to this?
There are. The question was if there's commercial terms on the website, and there are, yep. All the terms of service are readily discoverable. And then we have sort of different programs, so it just kind of depends if you want a monitoring program or a BASEMAP program, so read the fine print, yeah.
So for the space platforms, going forward, since you acquired Skybox, which one are you going to be focusing on more than any other, or are you going to be focusing forward all of them?
Yep, so the question was kind of what's our emphasis going forward with the multi-constellation approach. It's really kind of 2-tiered. The rapid eyes are aging, so we know that they're sort of approaching, a next life, that being end of life. And now we see that we have daily imaging with the Planet Scope, and then we have high-res imaging with the Skybox. So we really look at this as something we call tip and queue workflows, where I can monitor and understand everything that's happening on a daily basis. And if I need to task satellites for more detailed imagery, I can have these 12 other things that are orbiting that can kind of really follow on, in an immediate, request to look at this in more high res. So it's very much a 2-tiered approach. Okay, I think I have to turn it off just because the next person's on. I will happily answer any questions.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending.